Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 96th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our discussion panels twice monthly to demonstrate the value of civil, productive, open-minded political discussion. Today our panel will discuss the growing gap between the highest and lowest income brackets in the U.S. and ask the question, is it real and does it really matter? Today's panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. On her left is someone new to our panel. Filling in for Jerry Ritzman is Lou Kraus. Lou is a former nursing home operator and founder of the nonprofit Better Outcomes Incorporated. It's an organization committed to finding peace through civil discourse, which lines up with right and left very well. Bryan, as you know, there are many ways to interpret a set of numbers. Some politicians look at income differentials in our country and express great horror at the inequality. Do you think the numbers we see accurately represent the differences in the standards of living among Americans, and should we be concerned about it?
Well, I think to a certain extent, we need to look at how this all takes place. The articles that you provided basically lend themselves to different studies that were done and how income was derived. You know, they looked at tax returns. The CBO weighed in on it. There's a variety of measures. You can't ignore the fact that the people at the upper levels of income actually did better over the last 10 to 12 years. I have some of my own opinions about that. You know, people that are, I guess let's get away from the 1%. Let's just say that the upper strata of people, they have a tendency to save more. Their income is not only wages, but income that they derive from their investments. They have, other sources of income. Some of the studies didn't bring up the fact that government payments weren't taken into consideration. I know this is kind of technical, but basically we have to understand how they come up with this grave, disparity in income. I really believe that it's been that way, and because of the society that we live in. This is a capitalist society. We reward those that take the risk. And if you have a businessman, I'm sorry to hear that Jerry's not here this morning, but Jerry took a lot of risk when he and his partners went in and decided to open up a business. And they should be rewarded for that risk. And I don't think we as a society need to somehow determine what that reward should be. Is it too much or too little? And when we start wading into these arguments about how we tax those people, I mean, you can say that once you take into account taxes, and that's one thing that they didn't in these studies, they didn't take into account the taxes that these people pay all across the board. I think that that's a leveling effect too. Mm-hmm. But no, I agree. There is income disparity, but that's the system that we live in. People that are willing to risk by starting a business, being involved in a variety of ways as more or less equity holders instead of just working for someone, they get rewarded. And we've struggled with this particular issue for many, many years in our society. Way back in the day, incomes over, I think it was $1 million, were taxed at what, 90%?
Yeah, but there were so many loopholes, nobody paid it.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure. So that's another, that's probably more of a policy question that we can get into. But the solutions that have been put forth, I know this is really big. This is a big issue during the last 8 years with the Obama administration. They really pushed this, this whole thing about income inequality and leveling the playing field and going about fair taxes. Who pays your fair share? You have to pay your fair share. And
whatever that is.
You didn't build that. I think if you can remember that, you didn't build that. The government helped you and all that kind of stuff. And I think we need to get away from that and look at different ways to level that out.
Patty, do you think income differential is a problem?
Yes, I do. Surprise.
Yeah, shocked.
Shocked. Your comment about you can take a set of figures and two different people can read them completely different. And I know just from my background that figures can be misleading, and it does depend on interpretation. One of the figures, though, in looking at this that I found very interesting is that back in my generation,
We're still in your generation, Patty.
Okay.
Come on.
The probability that a child would earn more than their parent
Yes.
was something like 92%.
Yes.
That is now down to 50%. And what this is saying is that while we have the income inequality that exists, and there is always going to be some, it's never going to be everybody makes the same amount. Those opportunities for growth and the ability to grow and increase your income has diminished. And I think when Bryan talks about taking the risk to start a business, it was perhaps in some ways easier to do it for my generation than it is for a millennial to do such. Number one, they can't even get the loan to start the business. Then the idea is, well, work hard at a job and work, and you'll get, save up and you'll be able to get it. You talk about investments, having that money. Well, there are people out there working 3 part-time jobs at minimum wage, and they're not getting ahead. They're working every waking second of their life, and they're not able to save or even support themselves on the money that they make. It used to be that you could graduate from high school and you could get a decent job either by going to a trade school or just opening your own business or something of this sort. The chances of that now are slim to none. You need a college education. Well, if you're going to college right now, as we all know, Bryan and I have put children through college recently and know how expensive it is. And if you look at the cost for the amount of debt that people are coming out of college with, they're coming out of college with this monstrous debt that they'll be paying till the day they die, and they can't even find a job that pays them adequate amounts. So that inhibits their ability to increase. Unfortunately, what I'm seeing in present policies and policies that are being projected by our administration are policies which will only tend to increase the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Even if you look at the health care bill that is supposed to be voted on today but may get delayed as of this morning, I heard that, so we don't know. If you look at that, there's more subsidies going to the wealthy on this, not to those that actually can't afford health care. Those that can't afford health care, their subsidies are going to be reduced considerably. Their deductibles are going to go up. All this is going to do is to, again, decrease the income that bottom 80% has, as opposed to what the top have. The biggest gains in Trump's tax plan, which he'd like to get to, I know, as soon as the health care plan is over. The biggest gains are going to go to the wealthy. They're the ones that are going to see the big tax breaks, not the people on the bottom.
People on the bottom don't pay taxes.
Some of the people on the bottom do. I consider myself on the bottom because I'm not even close to where the top is. And I'm not even, when I looked at it, I don't think I would save a penny, but by golly, the top end is going to save quite a bit. So, does it exist? Yes. Are there reasons for it? Yes. And are there things that are happening now that are going to help it? I would have to say no. So
You may be the only person around that understands the health care bill.
I've actually read it and parts of it. I haven't gotten to the whole thing. But
I think that everything I've ever heard about either the Affordable Care Act or the bill that's going to be voted on today has been spun one way or another, and I don't know what the truth is about anything. Do you, Lou?
I gave up before the election.
Have you had a chance to think about this question about income inequality?
Not in terms of income. And I guess what I'm hearing, and as I said before, I'm a social worker. It seems like somehow we're translating income into the goods that people can buy. And I'm not sure how that plays out because there's so much difference in value that you can buy one thing that's very expensive and the same thing as a knockoff that's not. And I'm not sure what the value of our money is. Since we went off the gold standard, all you're really talking about is numbers. And I'm wondering if maybe we ought to rethink the income inequality in terms of goods and services that people have access to.
So you're thinking about it more in a quality of life or a standard of living than you are about absolute dollars.
Yeah, I would think so, because you can have, silly example, a drug dealer living in the ghetto whose income is substantially more than his neighbor's, but it's still not right. And the neighbors are starving and can be. Yeah. I don't know how you get people to shift their thinking along those lines. Because, in capitalism, it's a matter of dollars. You look at production and how much people make and how much taxes are, and I'm not sure what value those numbers have. And you mentioned you can look at numbers any different ways. I had a supervisor who used to pull them out of the sky.
One of the things that struck me, and Bryan mentioned it, is what in some studies they refer to as market income. And market income is before taxes and minus all government payments. For instance, somebody making $1 million before taxes, their income is recorded as $1 million. Somebody who is making $40,000 in welfare payments and other things from the government, their income is recorded as zero. And it hardly reflects the real world when you're comparing standard of living from one to the other. The guy at the top is not getting $1 million. The guy at the bottom is not getting zero. There's a much closer gap than that.
One of the things that I found interesting is that over the last, I think it was the little thing I saw, it might have been 10 or 15 years, our economy, the way it is right now with all the different things, has basically minted more millionaires than sort of any other time period. Mm-hmm. And they attribute some of this to companies like Microsoft,
tech industry,
tech companies, Amazon. There are people actually that work on the floor fulfilling Amazon orders that are millionaires.
Yes.
Okay, because they were compensated with company stock, and that company stock, they were invested in that. They not just from a financial standpoint, their heart and soul was invested in the concept of Amazon, the philosophies of Amazon. I find it amazing that you can order something. I can put an order in today before 2:30, and it's going to show up on my door the very next day. And in some of the services, they're looking at having it that afternoon if you get it in by 10 o'clock. So that's beside the point. But the fact is that our economy, the way, if we would let it work, I think some of the issues that we've seen, and there's always going to be outliers, some of the issues that we see will be solved. So when a Microsoft can basically mint millionaires, and I don't want to call them a dime a dozen, but there's a lot of them. Yeah. And these startups like Adobe and all the different tech companies that are out there that are compensating their people in a variety of ways, and if they actually invest, not just with their dollars, but with the philosophy, they're churning out people that are going to be much better off than the person that years ago took a factory job, like my grandfather built tires for Firestone for 40 years, and I'd be surprised if he made $1 million over his lifetime. You know, that was not what he was doing.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference in how that is made, and what we need to do is get some of these people that just go off to college and don't know what they want to do. We have to get them in some of those things. I go back to trying to find a plumber. You know, I'm all for apprenticeships. I'm all for training these kids. Not all of them are going to need to go to college. I take my car in, and that young man that works on my car knows more about computers and doesn't get very greasy.
He has to.
You know, and he's doing really well.
I want to circle back to that in a minute, but there's one other subject pertaining to these brackets, and that is that most people occupy multiple brackets over their lifetime. When you listen to some politicians, you get the idea that the top 1% are a permanent cadre of blessed people who happen to be at the top, and nobody can break into there. And the same at the bottom. But the fact is, most people move all the way through the brackets, one after the other. And it's not a permanent